India and its poetic scenario with reference to Indian English poetry, Shri R.K. Singh sir. We extend a very heartfelt welcome on behalf of our college, on behalf of our management, on behalf of the teachers here in the college, but most importantly, on behalf of all the participants who are present here. And among the participants, we have Professor Gurubdesh Singh sir, we have Dr. Bashudhara Roy, and we have the students of the book club and also students of the English department. So on behalf of all these students, all the participants today, and also on behalf of my college, we are extending a very heartfelt welcome, and we are full of gratitude. We are full of with all humility, we are full of pride and happiness that Shri R.K. Singh sir is here with us. And I also welcome Professor Gurubdev Singh sir, Dr. Bashudhara Roy, and all the other faculty members who have joined. And yes, of course, our guests and the students also. So a heartiest welcome to all on this occasion when the book club of Spark Kareem City College and IQAC Kareem City College is organizing this book talk, Tainted with Prayers, in which Singh sir will be talking about the book, or his book of the same title, and also about his literary and creative journey. He will also throwing light upon some of his other books. So it is certainly going to be a very cherishing and memorable and a very learning experience for all of us. So once again, a heartiest welcome to our respected guest and a heartiest welcome to all of those who have joined today. Thank you, Manish.
Thank you so much, sir, for your words of encouragement. We at Spark aim to groom the literary and uh, cultural temperament of students, and we at Book Club basically aim to grow a reading public. We aim to inculcate a reading. We aim to inculcate a literary trend among the readers. So today we have amongst us a great Indian poet, a great man of literature, Ram Krishna Singh sir. As he needs no introduction, but for the formalities, let me introduce you all to him. Ram Krishna sir was born on 31st December 1950 in Varanasi. He has been writing poetry for about 4 decades. He has authored over 160 academic articles, 175 book reviews, and 50 books. His recent collections of poems include I'm No Jesus and other selected poems, Tanka and Haiku, You Can't Send Me and other selected poems, God Too Awaits Light, Growing Within, Devasari, Haiku Tanka and other poems, and so on. The list is a long list. Widely published and anthologized and appreciated for his tanka and haiku, R.K. Singh's poems have been translated into several languages. The list is very long: Japanese, Greek, Italian, German, French, Irish, Spanish, and so on. He has been awarded as the he has been awarded as the Ritsumeikan University Peace Museum Award in 1999, Certificate of Honor in 2000, and Lifetime Achievement Award of the International Poets Academy in 2009. He's a big name. He is literally a big name. We will take so much from this evening. A big name in the English literature, a big name as an English poet. I I heartily welcome you, sir. It is an honor. It is literally an honor to see you here. Though we are meeting virtually, but let me thank this technology. This technology has made this possible. This evening is possible due to this technology. I heartily welcome you, sir. The session is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish, and thank you, Professor Ibrahim, Vasundhara, and other friends who are present this evening. I feel humbled by your rather exaggerated introduction, but it's a good opportunity for me to reflect. I'll try to confine myself to one or two aspects of the books that I published recently and that have been translated. Uh, each time I do a book, it is new, but disappointingly, it gets old without being read, reviewed, or critiqued by fellow academics, poets, reviewers, or critics that often complain about the quality of Indian English poetry and lack of criticism. Teachers and scholars involved in research hardly care to read new works published from small press by native poets and writers. They hardly suggest to the aspiring young researchers about new Indian English poets, less known Indian English authors, or regional authors writing in English that merit attention and academic exploration. More disappointing is the academic attitude towards research in recent poetry writing and the tendency to look for recognition of a poet or writer abroad or their appreciation by foreign media to be eligible for research at home. The slavish mindset and narrowness harms their own interest, be it creative, critical, or academic. In the IT-dominated world literary culture today, our Indian colleagues can't excel with the mindset of the 60s and 70s or even 80s, finding worth in the same few familiar names that are considered substantial, but are in fact dated to be talked about for something new if we really believe that Indian English poetry is readable and alive as a genre. This is what I say on the basis of so many theses, over 50 that I examined before I retired. Fellow practitioners of poetry, this evening I would like to talk to you against such a perspective about the bilingual editions of a couple of my recent books. Getting together in a book talk like this helps promote the cause of writing. And for now, Indian English writing, or if you like, Indian writing in English. I feel honored and am sincerely obliged to Professor S.M. Yahya Ibrahim for taking note of my 20th collection of poetry, Tainted with Prayers, published in 2020. Thank you, sir, and the participating poet friends and scholars for your interest in my works, published since the early 1980s, but almost ignored by the print media and academia that matter, possibly because I have been writing from a small place like Dhanbad. I doubt I am considered a mainstream poet yet, but I have not stopped. I have been keen to reach out to the new younger generation of poets, critics, reviewers, and academics, and tried to make available almost all my poetry books on the internet via my blogs, social sites, online zines and journals, and various other freely accessible resources so that interested scholars and researchers could access them easily. It has been a tremendous help, I must acknowledge. So many readers and poets discovered me and willingly helped me, invited me to join their literary groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., translated my poems, and even published my newer works, most recently in Spanish, Japanese, Arabic, Romanian, and Tatar. I have kept posting about each of such publications on my Facebook wall, Twitter, LinkedIn, and even Instagram. Some of you may have noticed them. I'm mentioning this because we can't ignore the reality of the social media, and it is this which has brought us together. Tainted with Prayers, with a Spanish title Contaminados con Oraciones, is the result of such a social media contact I developed with Spanish poet, writer, fictioneer, translator, blogger, editor, and peace activist Joseph Berelo Ramos of Colombia. He's 87 now and a key voice and respected name in Latin America for promotion of poetry and unity of poets. He has raised the level of online literary activities to a new height, and I hold him in high esteem for his spiritual humanism. In fact, I would love if you could read some of his works that are available on the net. Joseph invited me to join his literary forum, Uniletras, and set up a page on the sites of Naciones Unidas de las Letras and Ave Viajera for my recent poetry, which features this collection, Tainted with Prayers, with his translation in Spanish. In fact, he introduced me to the Latin American audience as a poet from India by translating and publishing not one, but two books, the other being the Spanish edition of my experimental haiku tanka haiku linked long poem, Silence, a White Distrust, which appeared last year. By the way, the Japanese paperback edition of this collection came out 3 weeks ago in English and Japanese. Also, poet translator Rika Inami, she published it. This poem is also included in the book COVID-19 and Surge of Silence in English and Tatar. Poet translator Taner Murad edited, translated, and published the collection from Antiquus Press, Constanta, Romania, about 3 months ago. This evening, I would rather concentrate on the translation side, because the bilingual editions, and people can read the English version, but a few words about translation in such a gathering is needed. because most people are unaware of what constitutes the work of a translator, how important it is, especially for a poet like me who aspires to be read by more and more people. Honestly, I don't know the languages my works have been translated into, but it is flattering to say that many of my poems have been translated into over 30 languages, including Italian, Greek, Chinese, French, Arabic, Farsi, and of course, as Manish mentioned, Spanish, Japanese, and Crimean Tatar. Before I talk about the translation of the Tainted with Prayers collection, let me read the micro poem from which the title of the collection is taken. Waking to a morning, tainted with prayers, on the toilet seat, nude nature waves a dull sun, smitten by the night's long eclipse. This tanka also appears in my Silence a White Distrust. Joseph Berolo calls his Spanish rendering of my poems as interpretative, as he seeks to negotiate cultural differences of the limitations of literal translation and balancing semantic and strategic uh, syntactic strategies for communication. He interprets some of my verse ideas with me as also with some of his other colleagues and asked me to explain what I meant by a particular expression and then pragmatically recreated in Spanish what he considered logical and culturally viable. I explicit and implicit sexual meaning or connotations. She said that she would prefer to drop those poems or rather avoid translating them. As a Syrian Arabic poet and woman, she thought explicit sexual expression is not expected by the audience. Alternatively, she later thought she could use some other words or phrases to recreate my poems. For example, in a haiku, love tickles with erect pistil hibiscus. In place of erect pistil, she suggested to use in Arabic distinguished pistil or upward pistil. In another poem, dreams puzzling, smallness of waking, I can't live, the child's circumcision, promise of happiness. In place of circumcision, she preferred to use smile. Similarly, she had difficulty in negotiating the meanings in poems such as short night and long days, sleep loss rustles of friction, echoing in bed, the cycle of cravings over and over again. Haiku, hidden between the sheets, my smothered senses, salted honey. And Tanka, layers of dust thicken, on the mirror water makes the smuts prominent. I wipe, and yet the stains stay like sin. And another haiku, in the bath, bare soul together, afterglow. She suggested to use path or snow in place of bath to be culturally acceptable in a society. Likewise, she faced problem with my use of nipples in the tanka. When I have no home, I seek refuge in the cage of your heart and close my eyes to see with your nipples the tree that cared to save from sun. And undressing in the haiku, she undresses in dim light, her body fills room with herself. Our interactions helped her use less suggestive Arabic expressions that are different from my English but socio-culturally acceptable to her Arabic audience. Her efforts at cultural negotiation to communicate made sense to me, even if I can't read, write, or understand Arabic. In fact, we needed to discover new ways of looking at our texts, ourselves, and our world for solution to difficult challenges. The publication of Fatima Tahir's translation is delayed because she is still working on her Arabic texts. All the same, her interpretative translation helps me reach out to a larger Arabic audience, even if my original poem is compromised at places. And more recently, in the Japanese edition of my other collection, Silence, a White Distrust, published uh, last year, the uh, digital edition, and paperback came just 2 months, just 3 weeks ago. So she spent about a year to perfect her translation of my haiku and tanka into the Japanese fixed structure. She too faced several challenges: semantic, syntactic, formal, and cultural, to negotiate the texts in accordance with the norms of Japanese haiku and tanka. She turned interpretative to be appealing both structurally and texturally in Japanese. She explained to me the linguistic and other challenges she made and other changes she made in her translation before publishing the book, as I said, 3 weeks ago. She too negotiated issues between two diverse cultures and languages in a context which demands making structural choices with textural accuracy, as she was using the fixed Japanese tanka, haiku, and scenario rhythms. For example, there are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and other words in English which, when translated into Japanese, consist of two or more moras, M-O-R-A-S, moras, even if they are only one syllable. For example, the English word rice, in Japanese, kome, and think in Japanese, omo, or kangaeru in Japanese, are one syllable. Rice and think in English are one syllable, but in Japanese, kome consists of two moras and omou three moras and kangaeru five moras. What we call syllable moras. This means that translating an English tanka, haiku, or scenario into Japanese, even if it is one syllable, will result in multiple sounds in Japanese kana script that she chose for managing the uh, texture of the poem, as I said. So, what helped me, she says, solve the problem of the fixed Japanese rhythm She found solution in the archaic Japanese grammar, particles, auxiliary verbs, and word conjugations. See, if she doesn't talk to me, she takes a decision, but she takes me into confidence because, as I said, my original text is somewhere compromised. And lastly, when Romanian cultural linguist friend Taner Murat translated my English poems into remote language Crimean Tatar, he too encountered a lot of challenges. He made pragmatic communicative adaptation for the convenience of Tatari audience, which is spoken in number of Central Asian countries and parts of Romania. So with his style, he created a new literary diction in Tatar in terms of concept, vocabulary, usage, and imagery. His main concern was revival of a dying language by accommodating new features of culture, life, and communication, arousing fresh interest, applying new norms of or for cross-cultural adaptation or pragmatic communication in a linguistic context that has been forgotten. So all of these poet translators, Rika Inami, Fatima Tay, Joseph Berelo, or Taner Murat, they create a new literary diction or discourse, if you like, for acceptability in Japanese, Arabic, Spanish, and Tatar. They become interpretative of the English, which is Indian, at times marked by a deviant style or rhetorical features, as you may have noticed. I don't use punctuations, I drop articles, don't give titles, use enjambments, use fewer adjectives, and minimum possible words. I eliminate all non-essentials from my composition, and as my poet critic friend late I.K. Sharma points out, lift the so-called unclean words of the street and give them new dignity. Obviously, it has its dangers. So much depends on how one reads a poem. When one normalizes the grammar of the individual lines of a poem and translates, one finds possibilities for multiple interpretations. One faces ambiguities of all sorts. The translators, therefore, need the freedom to interpret and express what is culturally, socially, and technically viable or convenient in the target language. Fatima Fateh, Rika, Fatima, Joseph, and Taner, they read my poems more closely and discovered something readers at home missed. This may be a pointer to the lack of criticism in Indian English poetry our academic friends complain about. But we can possibly talk more about it later. Suffice it to say, there is light in everyone waiting to be found. We just need to strive for it. If you permit, I may now end off with reading a couple of poems from Tainted with Prayers, or take your questions, if any, about my poems first.
No, sir, we would surely love to to hear your poems.
Okay. So I selected 4 or 5 poems. I already read a couple of haiku and tanka. Uh, I read the first poem, There is no third day. Nestled between smog and dust, my church faces a collapse beyond miracle. I can't stand up to resurrection. There is no third day for my soul, no third eye for Shiva in me. God is too old to revive the rhythm that was my once. I am now defaced, mired in scams, constantly raped and buried in chaos of abundance, hope and unanswered prayers in journey through crevices, love convulsions, and faith shops. Another poem, Self Neglect, Meditation, living long but failing to live wide, says Seneca, we are fugitive from ourselves. The busyness and weariness of now, we talk about regulating our sleep by one another's. Love or hate, what others dictate, we get duped. Our time lost without inner wholeness. Smallness. I live in a crowd of fakes. Smallness rises with age. My mind has ceased to think. New metaphors hardly happen. Hunger keeps me awake all night. I mitigate minginess. Inner lives are emptied and filled with fresh stresses. Too many fault lines run through to make sense of the divide. My passion itches and prompts. I nuzzle the virtual too. Is the same virus replicating, the same hackers that hurt, the vigor and rigor of the new, left or pushed behind. Whatever the remedy, wounds take deaths to heal. Profile. I don't know who shops my books or cares for sexy and wholesome for the time I showed up first. I haven't made any money, transcending decades and not belonging to back scratchers or goody goody poetic academia and press, trying not to seem better or sell. I have stayed bold and alone, a work in progress perhaps. Even without audience here, or maybe I simply don't fit the politics of writing now. But long after I'm dead, buried or burned to ashes, I may rise again, a tiny phoenix mapped in fresh DNA of silence from Google's graveyard. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you
Beautiful.
so much, sir.
Manish, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. The session was really thoughtful. We could literally feel the maturity of your poetry, the direct overflow of your poetry into our hearts. Now, I would open the session for questions. The participants are requested to chat to post their questions in the chat box or either unmute or ask. Meanwhile, the participants are typing the questions. Sir, I have a question. Sir, while translating, a translator generally loses the soul of the poem. The poet writes a poem with imagination, a thought process, and while translating, the translator loses the. So, how we as a poet will reconnect to our translated poem?
Thank you. Manish, I am afraid if it is a good translation, many times the translation reads better than the original. I have found many translated poems better than the original where I could understand the language. Uh, if all these poet friends about whom I talked, if they say interpretative translation, and if I reflected on the interpretative, I reflected in terms of several pragmatic communicative needs. And as I said, if we simply translate the verbal uh, from one form to another, then it is, you are right, possibly the soul is missed. But as I said, if the translator understands the spirit of the work, he tries to give the same spirit in various ways. He tries, but since, as I said, I don't understand any of these languages in which it is translated, so I may not be able to uh, find where they meet the spirit of my work, because they are trying to understand the spirit of my work. I hope I satisfied your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Uh,
Sir, there is a question in the chat box.
how to find chat box about?
Sir, I will read the question out for you.
Ah,
Sir, the question goes like this. Isn't it disheartening for you when the essence of or the words of your poetry are being disguised or rather eliminated and substituted to make it culturally acceptable?
no, no problem. Once I have written my poem and published it, the reader has the complete freedom to make whatever they make out of my poems. So I respect the independence of the reader, and by the same logic, independence of the translator. So it doesn't hurt me at all. It was kind of those translators who shared with me their changes for moral reasons. But had they not done it, as many of them never did, I'm happy. I reach out to the larger audience. This satisfaction at a time when nobody reads you. Am I satisfactory? Manish?
Yes, sir. I think the participant must have heard and must have recollected what you have said.
Yeah.
I invite
Yes,
more questions. If there are any questions, you may please post your question in the chat box. And I
We
also
have,
invite
we
all.
have with us, Manish, just a minute. We have with us Professor Gurupdesh Singh, sir. So I humbly request him that if you have any remark or any comment or any thing that he has to say to R.K. Singh, sir, please. Dr. Bashudhara Roy also.
good evening, sir. R.K. Singh, sir, thank you very much. We thoroughly enjoyed this particular session. I did not have a question as such, but since you also mentioned about Indian English poetry and the absence of proper, criticism in it, could you just throw a little light on the areas which, our students could consider working on? Because they also take up dissertations at the undergraduation level, and later on when they go to the post graduation level. So if you could, just from the perspective of an academic, you could talk about the areas that undergraduate students could consider working on in poetry, that would be wonderful.
I think one of the areas seems to be the literary communication, the pragmatic literary communication, semiotics, because most important is for success in at a higher level, for research work, for publication, because no research paper will be published if you are only analyzing the themes, for example, or you're talking in general, which is just everybody's understanding and
Disconnected. Perhaps
We
are
lose him?
yeah.
Yes, perhaps there were network issues at his end. I think he'll
Hmm.
join back.
Let's wait.
In the meantime, students, you can think of questions that you will put forward to Sir when Sir returns.
Perhaps he is even not aware that he has got disconnected because I'm continuously calling him and he's not picking the phone.
Oh,
हाँ he is वही मैं बताया ना कि when he was not aware that के disconnect हो गए so he was speaking so he's trying
oh
to
my God.
reconnect.
Dhriti ma'am's case.
हाँ correct. वो women cell वाला कैसा हुआ हम भूल ही गए अभी कौशल ने ये मैसेज
अच्छा रहा. She was a very young speaker, so she spoke from the perspective of students only. And it
Good.
was a short session, half an hour to 40 minutes. That was all right. Sir has joined.
Sir is here. Sir, please unmute yourself. You are muted. I think network is an issue.
Yes,
Sir?
probably. His voice was breaking also in between.
Sir, are you there? Sir?
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, now you are audible, sir.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, as long as it works, we can possibly talk. Vasudhara, did you hear what I said?
No, sir, we just missed you at the initial stage itself. So if you could, kindly repeat.
I was saying that literary communication could be the best approach, where pragmatic literary communication and all those theories around language use uh, that have been developed in the last 10 years could be a proper critical approach, because if the researchers or anyone interested in developing criticism or publishing a paper cannot be accepted in a journal unless you have something new to say. It is not talking simply what I say, the themes or the imagery or whatever, at the undergraduate level, what we talk about to the student, that will not make either criticism to be developed in Indian English poetry, or any research, worthwhile research work which is publishable. So, uh, persons who are interested, uh, be it fiction or poetry, they have to have a good literary critical tool in the hands, and be ready to highlight something new by way of interpretation, instead of superficially dealing with the theme or imagery or whatever the the things we talk at in MA classes or undergraduate classes. That will not work. Uh, this is very important, and the other areas could be linking it with the regional and national perspective, adopting the classical literary tools as well, where you can use any one theoretical approach, because very important, as I feel, as an examiner or researcher, or who has guided dozen of students for their MPhil or PhD, unless you have a proper critical approach which is in line with the current trends in the literary world, nothing will uh, be successful. We will simply read and say is good for nothing.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I guess that would be, that's a lot for our students. And I hope that we can also guide them accordingly to choose subjects in poetry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Basu ma'am. Sir, there is another question in the chat box. It is by Arzu Naz. She is asking, if we think of someone or something that is in opposition to us, that complicates or threatens our well being, or on the way of encapsulating our imagination into our poetry, what is in this world in its current manifestation can work against us, against it?
This is a non-literary question. uh, I do not know what I should say about in terms of literary exploration. But if something is against you, it is a matter of uh, cultural tolerance, most important, cultural tolerance, broadness of mind, and readiness, willingness to negotiate the differences. When I use the word negotiate, you can imagine what you do when you go to buy sabji and talk that if aloo is being sold at 5 rupees kilo and you say 4 rupees and you compromise at 4 rupees 50 paisa. Negotiate, give and take, and then agree to a mutually acceptable decision. That is the best way. But if we don't communicate, if we don't talk, and if we lose our balance, because opposition will be there and we have to live with the differences, negotiating the differences is the basic requirement. In fact, this is what is missing in our whole education, that we are becoming increasingly intolerant of differences. We are not ready, and we are just forcing something which we don't like, we don't want, and therefore others should change, I will not change. Tolerance for differences. That is what is in one line I can say. Yeah.
Sir, there is another question. Sir, it would be a delight for us if you can throw some light on why regional language English translation of literature is not being called Indian Bengali or Marathi, etc. These,
Oh, come on, come on. That is not, you know, uh, another very important thing is raising the right question. Asking the right question is very important. Unfortunately, she has not asked the right question. Bengali is Bengali. It is one of our languages. There is nothing which has to be thought as a outside language, foreign language, other language. It is one of the several Indian languages, and it is Indian. You don't have to call it Indian Bengali and then Bengali Bengali and then Bangladeshi Bengali and then Tripura Bengali and Assamia Bengali. The moment we write or speak, even after having lived here for more than 40 years in Dhanbad and Bihar, my Hindi has become Biharized. My tone has become like a Bihari's tone. The moment I go to Banaras, they will think, even rickshaw wala asks me, साहब आप बिहार से आए हैं? My tone, my expression has changed. So there is nothing to regret as or work as something Indian. It is Indian. What we talk about English writing, we being non-native speakers of English, we immediately understand from the way the person organizes their discourse, what they write or what they say in the way they write or say. From that, we understand the logicality of their thought. So, the English language, which is written in a linear, spoken in a linear manner, one thing linked with another. How often in our mother tongue we are using connecting expressions, connectives? In English, if you are not using connectives, you are not becoming linear, because one thought not related to other thought needs to be linked. You have to link. How often do you link your thoughts? And when you write your English, and 90% times you are asked, I have so many senior colleagues who have been working with me. They would come to me and say, "Sir, I submitted this paper," and they say, get your paper examined by a native speaker." Why? Because you lack logicality, relatedness of the thoughts, the connectedness of the thoughts, the use of connectives, and the proper placement of different elements of a sentence. That is different in English from the way we put in our own talk, because our thinking, our thoughts, our ideas are influenced by our own native language habit, which has been formed from our birth. You change, again it will be coming back to the same level after some time. You go and live in the native speakers environment, within 3 months you will be thinking and speaking like them. How often you are using the informal expressions, the verbal phrases, the verbal idioms? You are not using. You are reading the formal language in the books. You are hearing most of the time that language, and you are writing and thinking in that term. So you sound unnatural to them. And if you are unnatural, you might be writing in English, but you are different. This is what I called deviant structure. Linguistically, deviant structure. So that deviant structure is a problem. In English, if I am using it, it is Indian, like you have Malaysian, you have Filipinos, you have Arabic, you have uh, Caribbean, Portuguese, different people, different way, influenced by their own native culture of language. We are all doing it. So if English has to remain English, it is in its differences. And the writing that we do in English, creative writing, it is different from the native speaker's writing. Sometimes it is good when Yeats saw William Yeats saw Tagore's translation, Gitanjali, he found it different. It was new discovery for him. He got Nobel for it. I guess he won't get Nobel for what he writes because it is non-native, and the non-native English has its own variety. That's why I said the discourse has to be analyzed. Hope I made sense. Yeah, Manish?
Thank you so much, sir, for answering the questions patiently. We come to the conclusion of this event. Rumasa, I would like to request you to propose the vote of thanks. Rumasa, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. It's been a very fascinating and very engaging event. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks to on this memorable session. First and foremost, I thank our special guest today, Sir Ramkrishna Singh, who, despite his busy schedule, has found time to grace this session. I would also like to thank our faculty member, Dr. Yahya Ibrahim sir and Dr. Basudhara Roy ma'am, for allowing us to be a part of for such a valuable, informative and lucid discussion. Last but not the least, I thank all my fellows for your cooperation during this online session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Rumasa.
It's my pleasure.
Unfortunately, we come to an end to this beautiful literary mesmerizing session. We were spellbound, sir, literally.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Yaya Saab. Thank you, Vasundhara. Thank you, Manish.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye, sir.
Thank you to all the participants. Thank you